the man behind the myth, Trulitz, his real journeys, beliefs, and the communities he inspired.
Gentle, atmospheric music begins, evoking a sense of history and folklore. Hello and welcome. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's travel back in time together. We're heading to the untamed heart of early America, a land of sprawling forests, winding rivers, and the endless promise of the frontier. It's here, in this rugged landscape, that one of our most enduring folk legends was born. You've heard the name, haven't you? Johnny Appleseed. The mere mention of it conjures a very specific image. A kind-faced wanderer, maybe a little eccentric, with a tin pot for a hat and a burlap sack slung over his shoulder, overflowing with apple seeds. We picture him striding barefoot through the wilderness, a friend to all creatures, scattering seeds with a gentle hand and leaving a trail of blossoming apple orchards in his wake. A simple, beautiful story of a man who planted trees for future generations. It's a powerful myth, one that has been told to children for nearly 2 centuries. It speaks to our love of nature, our pioneering spirit, and the simple goodness we hope to find in the world. But myths, as lovely as they are, often smooth over the rough edges of reality. They simplify the complex, and sometimes they hide a story that is far more fascinating, more human, and more inspiring than the legend itself. So today, I want to invite you to look beyond the caricature, beyond the tin pot hat and the simple nursery rhyme. We're going to peel back the layers of the legend to find the real man. His name wasn't Johnny Appleseed. His name was John Chapman, and his story is one of incredible resilience, sharp business acumen, and a deep, unconventional faith that drove him on a mission that would quite literally change the American landscape. Imagine this scene. It's the turn of the 19th century. A lone figure walks steadily westward. The sun beats down. The path is rough, but his pace is unwavering. He isn't just aimlessly wandering. Every step is deliberate. In one hand, he might carry a walking stick. In the other, a leather satchel. But over his shoulder is his most precious cargo, a heavy sack, not of apples, but of countless tiny, brown apple seeds, harvested with care from the cider mills of Pennsylvania. This man, John Chapman, wasn't just planting for the sake of planting. He was a savvy entrepreneur, a real estate developer in his own right, and a devout missionary. He understood the law of the land, which stated that to claim a piece of frontier territory, a settler had to improve it. And one of the clearest ways to show improvement was to plant a permanent crop, like an orchard. 50 apple trees, to be exact. So, Chapman didn't just give seeds away. He was a nurseryman. He would travel ahead of the waves of settlers, find a promising plot of land near a river, clear it, and plant thousands of seeds. He'd fence it off to protect the delicate saplings from deer and livestock, and then he'd leave them in the care of a neighbor or simply let them grow. When the settlers finally arrived, exhausted and hopeful, looking to put down roots, who would be there waiting for them? John Chapman, with a ready-made nursery of young apple trees, for sale. He was providing the very foundation for a new home, a new life. And the apples these trees produced weren't the sweet, crisp-eating apples we know today. These were spitters, small, taut, and perfect for the most vital beverage on the frontier. Hard cider. In a time when water was often unsafe to drink, cider was the staple. It was currency. It was a source of calories, a safe refreshment, and a community beverage. Chapman wasn't planting a snack. He was planting a lifeline. But to paint him only as a businessman would be just as incomplete as the myth of the gentle wanderer. John Chapman was a man of profound and deeply personal faith. He was a follower of Emanuel Swedenborg, a Swedish theologian whose teachings were considered quite radical at the time. He believed in a world where God was present in nature, where kindness to all living things, humans and animals alike, was a sacred duty. Eyewitness accounts from the time don't describe a man in a tin pot hat, but they do describe his incredible kindness. They tell of a man who would sleep in the snow rather than disturb a hibernating bear and its cubs. A man who would buy a lame horse just to let it live out its days in a good pasture. He owned no weapon and was welcomed in Native American villages as a man of peace and medicine. He would travel from cabin to cabin, sharing not only his saplings, but also pages torn from his Swedenborgian texts, his news fresh from heaven. He saw his work as a divine mission, to bring the beauty of the apple blossom and the security of the harvest to the frontier, all while spreading a message of universal love and harmony with the natural world. This is the true story of John Chapman. He was tougher, smarter, and far more complex than the simple folktale allows. He was a canny businessman who understood supply and demand better than most. He was a rugged survivalist who could navigate hundreds of miles of wilderness alone. And he was a spiritual visionary who dedicated his life to a unique and beautiful purpose. He owned thousands of acres of land across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois by the time he died. But he lived a life of deliberate poverty, often trading his trees for old clothes or a simple meal. He was a walking contradiction, a wealthy landowner who lived like a pauper, a solitary wanderer who built communities, a shrewd capitalist driven by a spiritual mission. The legend of Johnny Appleseed is a beautiful, simplified echo of a much richer truth. The real John Chapman wasn't just scattering seeds at random. He was strategically planting the future of the American Midwest. He was a nurseryman, a missionary, a land developer, and a pacifist, all rolled into one. His legacy isn't just in the apple trees, many of which are long gone, but in the spirit of foresight, resilience, and faith that he embodied. He showed us that one person, with a clear purpose and an unwavering commitment, can leave an indelible mark on the world. The man behind the myth is a testament to the idea that a life lived with intention, however unconventional, can bear fruit for generations to come. So the next time you see an apple tree, maybe you'll think of him. Not just the cartoon character, but the real man, John Chapman, walking westward with his heavy sack of seeds, planting not just trees, but the very roots of a new nation. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. I hope you found the story of the real Johnny Appleseed as fascinating as I do. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories behind the legends. We have so much more to explore together. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the life of one of America's most enduring folk heroes. In our last episode, we set the stage, separating the man from the myth. Today, we're diving deep into the very beginning, into the world that shaped the man who would become Johnny Appleseed. This is Chapter 2, A Birth in Revolutionary America. Imagine the year 1774. The air in the American colonies is thick with tension, buzzing with whispers of rebellion and dreams of a new kind of freedom. The First Continental Congress is gathering in Philadelphia, a bold act of defiance against the British Crown. The Boston Tea Party is still a fresh, audacious memory. It's a time of profound uncertainty and electrifying possibility, a nation on the very brink of being born. Into this crucible of change, on September 26, 1774, a baby boy was born in the small town of Leominster, Massachusetts. His name was John Chapman. His arrival wasn't marked by fanfare or prophecy. He was simply another child, born to a colonial family. Yet the timing of his birth is incredibly significant. John Chapman was, quite literally, a child of the Revolution. His first breaths coincided with the first gasps of a new nation. To understand John, we have to understand his family and the world they inhabited. His father, Nathaniel Chapman, was a farmer and a Minuteman. Think about that for a second. Minute man. These were the citizen soldiers, the backbone of the colonial militia, who pledged to be ready to fight at a minute's notice. Nathaniel wasn't just a farmer tending his land. He was a man committed to the cause of liberty, a man willing to drop his plow and pick up a musket to defend his home and his ideals. Life for the Chapman family in Leominster was modest and deeply rooted in the land. It was a life of hard work, governed by the seasons. They would have lived in a simple wooden home, likely with a large central hearth for cooking and warmth. Young John's world would have been one of rolling hills, dense forests, and the rhythmic cycle of planting and harvesting. This early immersion in the natural world, this understanding of the soil and its bounty, undoubtedly planted the first seeds of the passion that would later define his entire life. Just 6 months after John was born, the shot heard round the world was fired at Lexington and Concord, just a short distance from Leominster. The Revolutionary War had begun. Nathaniel Chapman, true to his Minuteman oath, answered the call. He enlisted in the Continental Army, serving under General George Washington himself. This decision had a profound impact on the family. With Nathaniel away at war, the burden of running the farm and raising the children fell heavily on John's mother, Elizabeth. We have to pause and consider the strength of women like Elizabeth Chapman. While men fought on the battlefields, women fought their own battles on the home front, ensuring survival, maintaining the farms, and holding their families and communities together. Tragically, the hardship took its toll. Just a couple of years after John was born, while Nathaniel was still away at war, both Elizabeth and John's newborn baby brother passed away, likely due to complications from childbirth and the harsh conditions of the time. So, at a very young age, John Chapman experienced profound loss. His father was off fighting for a new nation, and his mother was gone. This early trauma is a critical piece of his story. It's an experience that could break a person, but for John, it seems to have forged a deep sense of resilience, and perhaps a lifelong search for a different kind of connection, a connection to the land and to a higher spiritual purpose. When Nathaniel Chapman finally returned from the war in 1780, he came back to a changed family and a changed world. He soon remarried, and the family grew. John now had a stepmother and a host of new half-siblings. This expanding family moved westward, first within Massachusetts, and then venturing out towards the frontier. This westward movement was a defining characteristic of the new United States. The war had been won, and a vast, untamed continent seemed to beckon. The spirit of the age was one of new beginnings. For the nation, it was about building a republic from the ground up, a grand experiment in self. For families like the Chapmans, it was about seeking new opportunities, new land, and a better future on the ever-expanding frontier. This sense of boundless potential, of a world being made anew, was the air that young John Chapman breathed. He was growing up in lockstep with his country. Think about the stories he would have heard as a child. Tales of his father's service in the Revolution, stories of bravery, sacrifice, and the birth of their nation. He would have seen firsthand the push westward, the clearing of land, the planting of the first crops in a new place. This wasn't just an abstract concept for him. It was his lived reality. The idea of planting something, of nurturing it, and watching it grow into something that could sustain future generations was embedded in his upbringing. It was the very story of America, and it was becoming his own personal story as well. This era, this revolutionary crucible, didn't just shape John Chapman's character. It provided the very mission that would come to define his life. The new nation was expanding, and as settlers pushed west, they needed to establish homesteads, and what was one of the most fundamental signs of a permanent, civilized settlement. An orchard, apple trees, in particular, were not just a source of food and drink. They were a legal requirement in many areas for claiming land. By planting an orchard, you were literally putting down roots. You were transforming a patch of wilderness into a home. So, as we see, the boy born in 1774 was a product of his extraordinary times. He was born into a revolution marked by early loss and raised amidst a national spirit of renewal and westward expansion. His father's patriotism, his family's connection to the soil, and the very real needs of a growing nation were all converging. These weren't just background details. They were the essential ingredients that would soon send a young man, John Chapman, on a remarkable journey west, armed not with a musket, but with a sack of apple seeds and a vision for the future. And that is where we will pick up next time. We'll follow a young John as he leaves his home and takes his first steps onto the American frontier, beginning the transformation from John Chapman into the legend we know as Johnny Appleseed. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter of the story. If you're enjoying this deep dive, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. I love reading your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello, and welcome back to our series. Today, in Chapter 3, we delve into a part of his life that is both heartbreaking and profoundly formative. His childhood among hardships. It's a story of loss, survival, and the quiet blossoming of a spirit that would one day touch the world. His life took a dramatic turn when he was just a young boy. The warmth and security of his early years were shattered by the sudden death of his mother. For any child, this is an unimaginable loss, a tearing away of the very foundation of their world. For him, It was a plunge into a reality that was harsh and unforgiving. Without his mother's gentle hand to guide him, his upbringing became a patchwork of neglect and struggle. He was left in the care of relatives who, burdened with their own challenges, couldn't provide the stable, nurturing environment he so desperately needed. Days were often marked by hunger and a gnawing sense of loneliness. He wasn't just a child without a mother. He was a child who had to grow up far too quickly, navigating a world that seemed to offer little comfort. The softness of childhood was replaced by the sharp edges of survival. He learned to be self-reliant out of sheer necessity. While other children were playing games, he was learning to fend for himself, to find his next meal, to endure the cold nights with a resilience that belied his young age. This wasn't a childhood of scraped knees from playground tumbles, but of a spirit toughened by real-world trials. He had to be his own protector, his own provider, his own source of comfort in a world that often felt indifferent to his suffering. But it's in the crucible of hardship that character is often forged. These difficult years, as painful as they were, instilled in him lessons that would become the bedrock of his entire philosophy. He learned, firsthand, the true meaning of resilience. Every day he got through was a victory, a testament to his own inner strength. He discovered that even in the face of immense adversity, the human spirit has a remarkable capacity to endure, to bend without breaking. This early struggle also gave him a profound sense of empathy. Having known true hunger, he could never be indifferent to the suffering of others. Having felt the sting of loneliness, he understood the deep human need for connection and kindness. These weren't abstract concepts to him. They were lived experiences etched into his very soul. This empathy would become a guiding principle in his later life, shaping his interactions with every person he met. He saw the struggles of others not as a judge, but as a fellow traveler who knew the weight of a heavy burden. He learned the value of simplicity. When you have very little, you learn to appreciate the small things, a piece of bread, a moment of warmth, a kind word. The grand ambitions and material desires that drive so many were foreign to him. His world taught him that true wealth isn't found in possessions, but in inner peace and the simple gifts of existence. This understanding would later define his minimalist lifestyle and his focus on what truly matters. Amidst this bleak landscape, a small seed of curiosity began to sprout. With no toys and few companions, he turned his attention to the world around him, to the silent, steadfast presence of nature. The fields and forests became his sanctuary, his classroom, and his playground. He would spend hours alone, wandering through the woods, his young mind captivated by the intricate world he discovered there. He developed an early and intense fascination with plants. To him, they weren't just green things growing from the ground. Each one was a marvel of design and purpose. He'd observe how they reached for the sunlight, how their roots clung to the earth, and how they weathered the seasons with a quiet determination that mirrored his own. He learned to identify different species, not from books, but from direct, patient observation. He'd study the shape of a leaf, the color of a flower, the texture of bark. He started to understand their cycles, their needs, and the subtle ways they interacted with their environment. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a deep intuitive connection. In the resilience of a weed pushing through a crack in the stone, he saw a reflection of his own struggle to survive. In the silent, steady growth of a tree, he found a model for patience and perseverance. Nature became his first and most important teacher. It taught him about cycles of life, death, and rebirth. It showed him that, even after the harshest winter, spring always returns. It was a source of endless wonder that filled the void of his lonely childhood. This early immersion in the natural world was also the first hint of the gentle wanderer he would become. The act of walking, of exploring, became second nature to him. It was his way of escaping his difficult circumstances, but it was also his way of connecting with something larger than himself. These solitary walks weren't just aimless wanderings. They were pilgrimages of a young soul seeking meaning and solace. He learned to move through the world with a quiet watchfulness. He wasn't a conqueror of nature, but a humble observer. This gentle, non-intrusive way of being would characterize his entire life. He learned to be content with his own company, finding companionship in the rustle of leaves and the song of birds. The solitude that was forced upon him by circumstance became a choice, a cherished state where he could think, observe, and simply be. Looking back, we can see how all the pieces were falling into place. The loss of his mother and the harshness of his upbringing created a void that he filled with an incredible inner strength and a deep connection to the natural world. The lessons of survival taught him empathy and stripped away any desire for material excess. His curiosity about plants wasn't just a pastime. It was the beginning of his life's work, the first stirrings of the wisdom he would later share. His childhood was not a happy one in the traditional sense, but it was profoundly meaningful. It was the fire that tempered the steel of his character. It planted the seeds of compassion, resilience, and a deep, abiding love for the simple truths of existence. The lonely boy who found solace among the trees was slowly, quietly, becoming the wise and gentle wanderer the world would one day come to know and admire. His path was set, not by grand ambition, but by the quiet, persistent call of his own resilient heart. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. It's a powerful reminder that our greatest strengths can often grow from our deepest wounds. If you found this story moving, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible journey. We'll see you next time. Have you ever looked at something tiny, something most people would just throw away, and seen a world of possibility? A simple seed, for example. For most, it's just the leftover part of a snack, but for a young man named John Chapman, it was the start of everything. This is the story of how a handful of apple seeds planted a lifelong calling, transforming not just his own destiny, but the very landscape of a young, hungry nation. Welcome back as we explore the seeds of a calling. John Chapman grew up surrounded by nature, but it wasn't until he truly looked, looked at an apple seed that his perspective shifted forever. He saw it not as waste, but as a promise of life, of sustenance, and of a future. In each tiny, dark teardrop, he didn't just see a single tree. He saw an entire orchard. He saw families gathering fruit, mothers baking pies, and communities flourishing around the simple, wholesome gift of an apple. This wasn't just about agriculture for him. It was something deeper, something spiritual. Planting a seed, for John, became a profound act of faith. It was a partnership with the earth, a way to connect with the divine rhythm of creation. Think about it. You place this seemingly lifeless speck into the soil. You give it water and care, and you trust. You trust that, with sun and time, it will push through the darkness and reach for the sky. This act mirrored his own spiritual beliefs. He saw planting as a way to spread goodness, to leave the world a little better, a little more fruitful than he found it. It was a tangible way to express his love for both his fellow man and for the natural world. It was a sermon preached, not with words, but with soil-stained hands, in the quiet patience of a gardener, and the world around him was desperately in need of this sermon. The American frontier at the turn of the 19th century was a place of immense hardship, but also incredible hope. Families were pushing westward, carving out new lives from the wilderness. They were building homes, clearing land and dreaming of a better future. But this new life was tough. They needed stability, they needed permanence, and they needed sources of food and comfort that would last for generations. The frontier was hungry not just for food, but for symbols of growth and renewal. An apple tree was the perfect answer to this hunger. Unlike annual crops that had to be replanted every year, an apple orchard was an investment in the future. It was a sign that you were putting down roots, literally and figuratively. Planting an orchard meant you were there to stay. It provided fruit for eating, cider for drinking and preserving, and a tangible link to the settled, civilized life many had left behind. An apple tree represented stability in a world of constant change and uncertainty. John understood this deep-seated need. He saw that by providing settlers with the means to grow their own orchards, he wasn't just selling trees, he was selling hope. He was helping to cultivate the very fabric of these new communities. With this powerful realization, John's mission began to take shape. But it wasn't an overnight success. It started small, with early experiments. He began collecting seeds from cider presses in Pennsylvania, bags and bags of them, saved from being discarded. He learned through trial and error, figuring out the best ways to prepare the soil, how to protect the delicate seeds from frost and pests, and how to nurture them into healthy sepals. He wasn't a formally trained botanist. His knowledge came from observation, intuition, and a whole lot of patience. His first nurseries were humble patches of cleared land, often along the banks of rivers which served as natural highways. He would find a promising spot, fence it in to protect it from wildlife, and meticulously plant his precious seeds in neat rows. He wasn't just throwing them on the ground, he was cultivating them with care and intention. He'd tend to these plots for a couple of years, until the saplings were strong enough to be transported and sold. This was his process, his craft. He would then move further west, always a little ahead of the main wave of settlement, preparing the ground for the families that would follow. Imagine the scene. A lone figure, wading through rivers and trekking through dense forests, his most valuable possessions being sacks filled with apple seeds. He wasn't driven by a desire for wealth in the traditional sense. His payment was often meager, a few coins, some old clothes, or simply a promise to pay him later. But his real profit was seeing those saplings take root in a family's new homestead. His reward was the knowledge that years from now, a child would be able to pick a fresh apple from a tree that started as a seed in his own leather pouch. These early nurseries were the first tangible results of his vision. They were the physical manifestation of his calling. From these small, scattered plots, a legend began to grow. Word spread among the settlers about the kind, eccentric man who brought apple trees to the frontier. He was becoming more than just John Chapman. He was becoming a symbol of providence and foresight. He was the man who thought of the future when everyone else was just trying to survive the present. This was the beginning of his life's work. It was a journey that would span decades and cover thousands of miles. But it all started here, with the simple, profound realization that a single seed holds the power to change the world. It's a powerful reminder for all of us that sometimes the biggest callings, the most impactful legacies, begin with the smallest, most overlooked things. It all depends on what we choose to see and what we choose to cultivate. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the journey. The story of Johnny Appleseed is just getting started, and his travels will only get more incredible from here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. We'll see you next time. Video opens with visuals of a vast, misty Appalachian landscape at dawn. A lone figure is seen walking away from a small settlement. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today, we continue our journey into the life of a true American original. Last time, we left John Chapman in Pennsylvania, a man with a vision as vast as the wilderness itself. Now, we follow him as he takes his first steps into the great unknown, a journey that would forever cement his place in legend. Imagine this. It's the very beginning of the 19th century. The world is changing, but the American frontier remains a realm of untamed, raw beauty. This is the world John stepped into. He left the relative comfort of Pennsylvania, his gaze fixed firmly on the west and the fertile lands of Ohio and Indiana that were just beginning to open up. This wasn't a journey for the faint of heart. There were no paved roads, no convenient inns, just an endless expanse of nature in its purest form. Visuals shift to lush, dense forests, sparkling rivers, and wide-open show the beauty and the obstacles of the landscape. The landscape John traversed was breathtaking. Picture ancient forests where sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy, creating a cathedral of green and gold. Imagine rivers, clear and cold, carving their way through the land, and vast prairies that stretched to the horizon, painted with wildflowers of every color. John saw this not as an obstacle, but as a sanctuary. He felt a deep spiritual connection to this wilderness. It was his church, his home, and his proving ground. But don't be mistaken. This beauty came with immense challenges. This was a land of sudden, violent storms, of thick underbrush that could tear at your clothes and skin, and of wild animals that were not yet accustomed to the presence of man. Travel was slow and arduous. Every day was a test of endurance and resourcefulness. A wrong turn could mean days of being lost. A sudden river swell could wash away your precious supplies. For most, it was a terrifying prospect. For John, it was simply life. Close-up shots of bare feet walking on different terrains, soft moss, smooth river stones, dry earth. Perhaps a reenactment of John interacting kindly with settlers. And this is where the legend truly begins to take shape. As he journeyed, a peculiar detail about him started to spread from one small settlement to the next. More often than not, John was seen without shoes. Think about that for a second. Walking hundreds, even thousands of miles, through the rugged, unforgiving wilderness. Why? Was it a display of toughness? A religious penance? The truth is probably a mix of practicality and principle. Shoes were a luxury, and they wore out quickly on the trail. For John, who embraced a life of simplicity and poverty, going without them was natural. His feet became tough as leather, perfectly adapted to the terrain. This simple, yet extraordinary, habit earned him a name that would echo through the frontier: the barefoot wanderer. Imagine the sight he must have been to the settlers, huddled in their small, isolated cabins. A man appearing out of the woods, clothes patched and worn, a cooking pot on his head for a hat, and his feet bare to the earth. He wasn't a threat. He was a gentle, eccentric presence. He brought news from the East, stories, and most importantly, he brought the future in the form of apple seeds. His reputation grew not just from his appearance, but from his actions. He was known for his kindness, his deep knowledge of the wilderness, and his unwavering mission. Show visuals of John planting seeds or giving a small sapling to a family. He would find a promising clearing, often near a new settlement or along a future path of migration, and he would plant his precious apple seeds. He wasn't just scattering them randomly. He was a skilled nurseryman. He would carefully prepare the soil, plant the seeds, and often build a brush fence around the plot to protect the young saplings from deer and other animals. He was creating orchards in the middle of nowhere, a gift for the families who would one day call that place home. This was his business, but it was also his ministry. The barefoot wanderer was planting more than just trees. He was planting hope. He was a tangible link between the civilization the settlers had left behind and the prosperous future they dreamed of. His nurseries became landmarks, points of reference in a vast, unmapped territory. People would say, "Head west until you find Chapman's clearing," and they would know they were on the right path. Visuals of a time-lapse showing a small sapling growing into a fruit-bearing tree transitioned back to the host. This initial journey westward was the crucible that forged the man into the myth. It established his methods, his reputation, and his unique place in the fabric of the frontier. He wasn't a conqueror of the wilderness, like so many others. He was a partner to it. He moved with its rhythms, respected its power, and worked with it to cultivate a gentler, more fruitful world. The barefoot wanderer was on his way, and the landscape of America would never be the same. What an incredible chapter in his life. The perseverance and vision it must have taken are just astounding. We'll explore how these small, isolated nurseries became the foundation of a frontier-spanning enterprise in our next episode. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this community. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We love reading your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello, and welcome back. Today, we're rediving into a story that asks about so much more than just a piece of fruit. We're exploring Chapter 6, The Apple as a Frontier Treasure. When you picture the American frontier, what comes to mind? Vast landscapes, log cabins, and rugged individuals carving out a new life. But have you ever considered the humble apple as one of their most essential tools for survival? It might sound strange, but for those early settlers, the apple wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline. Imagine you've just traveled hundreds of miles, leaving everything you knew behind. You've built a small cabin, cleared a patch of land, and now you face the daunting task of surviving the harsh winters and unpredictable seasons. Food preservation is everything. This is where the apple truly shines. Forget simply eating it fresh off the tree. For settlers, the real magic was in what the apple could become. The primary product was hard cider. Now, let's be clear. This wasn't the sweet, bubbly drink we often think of today. Frontier cider was a fermented, alcoholic beverage that was often safer to drink than the local water, which could be contaminated with all sorts of nasty bacteria. A family could produce barrels of cider from their orchard, providing a stable, calorie-rich, and relatively safe source of hydration throughout the year. It was the everyday drink for men, women, and even children. A staple on every homestead. Beyond cider, there was vinegar. Apple cider vinegar was the frontier's multi-purpose cleaner, preservative, and medicine cabinet all in one. It was used for pickling vegetables, allowing families to store their summer harvests for the brutal winter months. A surplus of cucumbers could become pickles, and cabbage could become sauerkraut, all thanks to the acidic power of apple cider vinegar. It was also used as a cleaning agent, a health tonic, and a way to tenderize tough cuts of meat. In an era before refrigeration and supermarkets, the apple provided the key ingredient for Then there was apple butter, a thick, sweet spread made by slow-cooking apples for hours until they... It was a way to preserve the fruit's sweetness long after the harvest season ended, providing a much-needed treat and source of energy during lean times. Apples could also be dried into rings, creating a lightweight, nutrient-dense snack that could be stored indefinitely and rehydrated when needed. So, you see, an apple orchard wasn't just a pretty addition to a homestead. It was a factory for survival, producing food, drink, and medicine. This is where our friend John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, re-enters the story, but perhaps in a new light. When we think of him, we often imagine a whimsical character scattering seeds at random. The reality was far more profound. The seeds he carried in his leather pouches weren't just potential trees. They were packets of hope. They were the building blocks of civilization, comfort, and a touch of sweetness in a very harsh world. Think about it. For a family isolated on the frontier, the taste of a sweet apple or a sip of cider was a powerful connection to the homes they had left behind in the East. It was a reminder of an older, more established world. A taste of comfort amidst the daily struggle. John wasn't just planting seeds. He was planting familiarity. He was helping to transform a wild, untamed landscape into a place that felt like home. His nurseries provided the saplings that would grow into these life-sustaining orchards, ensuring that as settlers moved west, the tools for building a stable life moved with them. Each seed John planted carried the genetic code for a unique apple, a lottery of flavors from tart to sweet. This genetic diversity was crucial. Some apples would be perfect for cider, others for drying, and some for making vinegar. He wasn't just giving people apple trees, he was giving them a versatile toolkit for living. The sweetness of an apple was a rare commodity on the frontier, a stark contrast to the often bland and monotonous diet. That burst of sugar was more than just a pleasant taste. It was a source of quick energy and a morale booster. John understood this deeply. He was delivering one of the few simple pleasures available to these pioneers. His work ensured that even in the most remote clearings, a family could experience the simple joy of biting into a crisp apple or sharing a warm slice of apple pie. He was, in essence, a traveling purveyor of comfort and joy, delivered in the form of a humble seed. But John's mission went even deeper than providing practical necessities. There's a powerful spiritual and symbolic dimension to his work that we often overlook. The act of planting a tree is an act of faith. It's a profound expression of hope for the future. You don't plant an apple tree for immediate gratification. You plant it knowing that it will take years of care and patience before it bears fruit. You are investing in a future you may not even live to see, providing shade and sustenance for generations to come. This act of planting was a powerful statement for settlers building a new world. It signified permanence. It was a way of saying, we are here to stay. We are putting down roots, both literally and figuratively. An orchard transformed a temporary camp into a permanent home. It was a legacy, a living inheritance passed down to one's children and grandchildren. John Chapman embodied this philosophy. He saw the divine in nature and believed his work was a form of worship. By planting trees, he was participating in the act of creation, nurturing life, and bringing beauty and abundance to the wilderness. He wasn't just a nurseryman. He was a spiritual guide, teaching by example. He showed people that their connection to the land could be one of stewardship and care, not just exploitation. In a society that was increasingly focused on expansion and conquest, John's message was a gentle but radical counter-narrative. He walked through the world with a sense of reverence, believing that every seed held a spark of life that deserved a chance to grow. Planting a tree was, for him, a prayer for peace, a gesture of kindness to the earth and to future inhabitants. This brings us to the core of what made John Chapman so unique. In an age of relentless ambition, where the frontier was seen as a place to get rich quick through trapping, land speculation, or gold prospecting. John's mission was fundamentally different. He wasn't seeking wealth or fame. In fact, he actively avoided it. His goal was not to take from the land, but to give back to it. His currency was not gold, but life itself. He sought to bring nurture, growth, and sustenance wherever he went. While others were cutting down forests, John was planting them. While others were driven by a desire for personal gain, he was driven by a deep sense of compassion for both his fellow humans and for the natural world. His business model, if you can even call it that, reflects these. He would sell his saplings for a few pennies, or trade them for old clothes or a simple meal. If a family couldn't afford them, he would often give the trees away or let them pay him back whenever they could. His wealth was not measured in dollars, but in the thousands of orchards that blossomed across the Midwest because of his efforts. He was a true minimalist, living a simple, nomadic life with few possessions, content with his purpose. He showed that a rich life wasn't about what you owned, but about what you contributed. His legacy isn't found in a mansion or a monument, but in the apple trees that are the genetic descendants of his labors, still growing in old farmsteads across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. He chose a path of gentle service, a mission to nurture life in its simplest, most beautiful form. John Chapman wasn't just a folk hero. He was a visionary who understood that the greatest treasure you can leave behind is a world that is a little more fruitful, a little more beautiful, and a little more hopeful than you found it. What an incredible perspective on a figure we thought we knew. The apple was so much more than a snack. It was the foundation of a new way of life on the frontier, and Johnny Appleseed was its most devoted champion. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If you enjoyed this exploration, please give this video a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next chapter. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below and let us know what you found most surprising. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life of John Chapman, the man we know as Johnny Appleseed. In this chapter, we're diving deep into the very soul of the man, exploring the spiritual beliefs that guided his every step. This isn't just a side note to his story. It's the very compass he used to navigate his life. So, what was this powerful force that shaped him? John Chapman was a devout follower of Swedenborgian Christianity, also known as the New Church. Now, this wasn't the mainstream faith of his time, but for John, it was everything. At Swedenborgianism teaches a profound and beautiful connection between the physical world and the spiritual realm. It sees the divine not as some distant, untouchable being, but as a loving presence woven into the very fabric of existence. For John, this meant that every leaf, every stream, and every apple tree was a direct expression of God's love. This belief system wasn't just an intellectual exercise for him. It was a lived reality. It instilled in him a set of core values that he practiced daily: kindness, simplicity, and a deep reverence for nature's divine order. He saw humanity, animals, and the natural world as part of one interconnected family. This is why he was so gentle with animals, why he chose to live with so little, and why he found such profound joy in the simple act of planting a seed. He believed that by nurturing the earth, he was participating in a divine act of creation. His mission wasn't just about apples. It was about spreading little pockets of paradise, just as he believed heaven was a state of being you could cultivate here on earth. This spiritual foundation was the engine of his travels. He wasn't just a wandering nurseryman. He was a missionary. But his mission wasn't about loud sermons or grand conversions. He was a missionary of a different kind. Tucked into his worn leather pack, alongside his precious apple seeds, were pages torn from the writings of Emmanuel. As he traveled from settlement to settlement, he would share these writings, reading them aloud to families gathered by the firelight. He believed that by sharing these ideas, he was planting spiritual seeds alongside his physical ones. He wasn't trying to force his beliefs on anyone. Instead, he offered them as a gift, a way of seeing the world that had brought him so much peace and purpose. His travels were a pilgrimage, with each step taken in service to his God and to his fellow human beings. He saw the frontier not as a wild, untamed land to be conquered, but as a blank canvas upon which a new, more harmonious society could be painted, one rooted in kindness and a respect for the divine order of nature. His spirituality wasn't something he compartmentalized. It flowed directly into his actions, most notably in his incredible generosity. Swedenborgian teachings emphasize a life of usefulness, the idea that true spirituality is expressed through serving others. For John, this was a sacred duty. His generosity wasn't just an occasional act. It was his default state of being. Think about it. He spent his life cultivating apple orchards, a process that takes years to bear fruit. He was planting for a future he might not even see, for communities yet to be built. He rarely accepted money for his saplings, often trading them for a meal, a place to sleep, or simply giving them away to those who couldn't afford them. There are countless stories of him giving away the little money he had, or even the shoes off his feet, to someone he felt needed them more. This wasn't foolishness. It was a radical expression of his faith. He believed that everything he had was a gift from God, and it was his job to pass that gift along. His belief system taught that the material world was fleeting, but acts of love and charity had eternal significance. So when he gave away his last coin or his only shirt, he wasn't losing something. In his mind, he was making a spiritual investment, participating in the flow of divine love. His generosity wasn't born from a sense of obligation, but from a deep, joyful understanding that in giving, he was connecting with the very essence of the divine. He was living out the sermon he carried in his heart, proving that the greatest wealth isn't what you own, but what you give away. So, as we reflect on Johnny Appleseed, it is crucial to see him as more than just a folk hero with a pot on his head. He was a spiritual wanderer, a man whose deep faith in a loving, interconnected universe guided his every action. He saw the divine in the rustle of leaves and in the eyes of a stranger. His life was a testament to the idea that a simple existence, dedicated to kindness and service, could be the most profound spiritual journey of all. He wasn't just planting apple trees. He was planting hope, kindness, and a vision of a world where nature and humanity could coexist in beautiful, divine harmony. His legacy isn't just in the orchards that dot the American landscape, but in the powerful example of a life lived with purpose, guided by a gentle and unwavering faith. Thank you so much for joining us for this deeper look into the soul of John Chapman. I hope it gives you a new appreciation for this incredible figure. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to continue the journey, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. We love having you as part of our community. Until next time, take care. Welcome, bike history lovers and story seekers. In our last chapter, we followed Johnny Appleseed through the untamed wilderness, planting the seeds of the future. Today, we're diving into Chapter 8, Life Among the Settlers. This is where the man transforms into a living legend, where his story intertwines with the lives of the very people he aimed to help. Let's explore how Johnny didn't just plant trees, but also planted seeds of kindness and community in the heart of the American frontier. Imagine this. You're part of a family living on the edge of civilization. Your days are long, your work is hard, and visitors are a rare, sometimes uncertain, event. Then, one day, a peculiar figure appears at your doorstep. He's clad in simple, worn clothes, sometimes a burlap sack, and carries a pouch heavy with apple seeds. His eyes are kind, his smile is genuine, and he has no weapon but the gentle spirit he carries. This was the sight that greeted countless frontier families, and their reaction was almost always the same. Open arms and a warm welcome. Johnny Appleseed, or John Chapman, as he was formerly known, wasn't just a wandering nurseryman. He was a welcome guest, a breath of fresh air in the often isolated lives of the settlers. Why was he so universally accepted? It came down to his character. He was a man of peace. In a time when mistrust could be a survival tool, Johnny's unassuming presence disarmed everyone he met. He asked for little and gave so much. He wasn't a threat. He was a friend. They just hadn't met yet. He'd be offered a seat by the fire, a plate at the table, and a spot to rest his weary feet, often choosing the floor or the porch over a soft bed, a testament to his humble nature. One of the most endearing aspects of Johnny's character was his profound connection with the youngest and most vulnerable members of any household, the children and the animals. Kids were naturally drawn to him. He wasn't a stern, imposing adult. He was a storyteller, a gentle soul who treated them with respect and fascination. He would gather them around, his eyes twinkling, and share tales from his travels or stories from the Bible, which he knew by heart. He'd show them as precious apple seeds, explaining how each tiny seed held the promise of a mighty tree laden with fruit. For children whose lives were often filled with chores and hardship, Johnny's visits were magical. He brought a sense of wonder and novelty that was as nourishing as the food on their table. His gentleness extended to all living creatures. Stories abound of his kindness to animals. He was known to purchase old, worn-out horses, destined for a grim fate, just to let them live out their days peacefully in a good pasture. One famous tale tells of him putting out his own campfire because mosquitoes were flying into the flames. Another recounts how he once shared his small shelter with a mother bear and her cubs during a snowstorm, choosing to sleep outside in the cold rather than disturb them. Whether these stories are entirely factual or embellished over time, they paint a consistent picture of a man with a deep reverence for all life. This compassion resonated deeply with the settlers, who, despite living off the land, understood and respected the delicate balance of nature. Johnny embodied a harmony with the world that many admired. Now, let's talk about his unique form of commerce. Johnny wasn't a typical businessman driven by profit. His mission was to plant orchards, and his currency was often kindness itself. He would arrive at a settlement with his bags of precious apple seeds, which he had painstakingly collected from cider presses back east. He would offer these seeds or young saplings to the families, but he rarely asked for money. Instead, he operated on a system of trade and goodwill. In exchange for his apple stock, he might accept a simple meal, a piece of clothing to replace his worn-out garments, or even just a place to sleep for the night. Sometimes, a family might have a little extra cornmeal, a pair of old shoes, or a warm blanket to offer. Johnny would accept these gifts with gratitude, seeing them not as payment, but as a continuation of a cycle of generosity. If a family had absolutely nothing to spare, he would often give them the seeds for free, simply asking that they shared their future bounty with others. This wasn't a business model. It was a philosophy. He believed that the gift of an apple orchard was something that should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their wealth. This approach built trust and cemented his reputation as a man of the people, a true public servant whose wealth was measured in the number of lives he touched, not the coins in his pocket. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the Johnny Appleseed story, the birth of a legend. With every town he visited, the stories about him grew. When word spread that Johnny was on his way, the news would travel faster than the man himself, carried by travelers and neighbors. And with each telling, the tales became a little grander, a little more magical. The line between John Chapman the man and Johnny Appleseed the myth began to blur, creating a figure that was half truth, half folklore. Did he really wear a cooking pot as a hat? Probably not all the time, but it made for a great story and a memorable image. Was he impervious to the cold, walking barefoot in the snow? Accounts suggest he was incredibly hardy and accustomed to the elements. But the image of a man untouched by winter's bite added to his mystique. People would say he could talk to animals, that he was protected by a higher power, that his orchards bloomed faster and stronger than any others. These weren't lies told with malicious intent. They were the ways in which people tried to make sense of such an extraordinary, selfless individual. His arrival in a town became an event steeped in oral tradition. I heard he wrestled a bear and then shared his honey with it. One person might say, my cousin told me he planted an entire orchard in a single afternoon, just by whistling a tune. Another might add, these stories served a purpose. They transformed a humble nurseryman into a folk hero, a symbol of perseverance, generosity, and the untamed spirit of the frontier. He wasn't just planting apple trees anymore. He was planting stories in the American imagination, stories that would be passed down through generations, long after the last of his original trees had withered. Johnny became a living embodiment of the ideals the new nation held dear: hard work, kindness, and a deep connection to the land. As we look back at his life among the settlers, we see a beautiful Johnny provided the tangible gift of apple orchards, which offered sustenance, cider, and a way for settlers to legally claim their land. But in return, the settlers gave him something just as valuable: a home in their hearts and a permanent place in their stories. They welcomed him, cared for him, and, most importantly, they remembered him. They were the keepers of his flame, the storytellers who ensured that the man who walked hundreds of miles for the sake of others would never be forgotten. His legacy wasn't just written in the landscape with rows of apple trees, but also in the collective memory of a grateful people. He became more than a man. He became a piece of America's soul. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Johnny Appleseed's life. It's a powerful reminder that a single person, armed with a simple idea and a kind heart, can truly change the world. One sedand, one story at a time. If you've enjoyed this chapter of our story, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next installment. We love hearing from you. So drop a comment below and share what you find most inspiring about Johnny's life with the settlers. Until next time, keep seeking out the stories that shape our world. Welcome back to our journey through the man who planted trees. Today, we delve into Chapter 9. Planting with Purpose. We're moving beyond the initial act of planting and into the heart of Elzard Bufierre's profound philosophy. A philosophy built on patience, strategy, and an unshakable faith in the future. When we think of planting on a massive scale, we might imagine someone scattering seeds to the wind, hoping for the best. But that wasn't Elzard's way. His was a work of precision and intention. He wasn't just throwing acorns into the ground. He was creating life, curating a future forest. He understood that, for a seed to become a mighty oak, it needed the best possible start. This is where his genius truly shines. Instead of random scatterings, Elzard created nurseries. Imagine that for a moment. This solitary man, in the heart of a desolate landscape, meticulously sorting his acorns after soaking them in water. He would examine each one, discarding the small or cracked, selecting only the most perfect, most viable seeds. He was like a jeweler inspecting priceless gems, because to him, that's what they were, the jewels of a future world. He would then plant these chosen acorns in carefully prepared soil, tending to them, protecting them from rodents, and giving them the dedicated care they needed to germinate. He was essentially building an army of saplings, strong and ready for their mission. This method was far more labor-intensive, but infinitely more effective. By nurturing them in a controlled environment first, he dramatically increased their chances of survival when they were transplanted into the wild. He wasn't gambling with nature, he was partnering with it. He understood its rules and respected its power. He knew that a well-cared-for sapling had the resilience to face the harsh winds and uncertain rains of the highlands. This wasn't just planting. It was an act of profound foresight. He was thinking not in terms of days or months, but in decades and centuries. He was laying the foundation for an ecosystem. One of the most moving aspects of his work was his return. Planting the saplings was only the beginning. Years would pass, and Elzard, now older, would journey back to the areas he had planted. He wasn't just checking on his progress. He was returning to tend his orchards. He would walk among the young trees, which were now taking root and beginning to transform the landscape. He'd check on their health, perhaps clearing away competing weeds or ensuring they had enough space to grow. It was like a parent visiting a child who was gone off to college. There was a deep, personal connection to every single tree. Think about the sheer dedication this required. To walk for days, back to a place you hadn't seen in years, simply to care for trees that you might not live to see reach their full maturity. It's a level of commitment that's almost unimaginable in our fast-paced world. He wasn't looking for a quick return on his investment. His reward was the act itself, the knowledge that he was contributing to a slow, magnificent healing of the land. His orchards weren't just rows of trees. They were living, breathing monuments to his quiet persistence. This brings us to the core of his spirit, the delicate balance of patience and faith. Patience is a virtue we often talk about, but Elzard Buffier embodied it. He worked without any expectation of immediate results. He knew that the transformation of a barren wasteland into a thriving forest was not something that could be rushed. He planted his seeds and saplings, and then he waited. He waited through seasons, through years, through wars and the changing world around him. His patience wasn't passive. It was an active, hopeful waiting. And that patience was fueled by an incredible faith, not necessarily a religious faith in the conventional sense, but a deep, unwavering belief in the power of a single, positive action to ripple outwards and create immense change. He had faith that the acorns would sprout, that the saplings would grow, and that the forest would one day return. He couldn't prove it. He had no guarantee. All he had was his daily labor and the conviction that his work mattered, in a world that often demands instant gratification. Elzard's story is a powerful reminder that the most meaningful changes are often the slowest. His faith wasn't blind. It was earned through every seed he sorted and every sapling he planted. Let's linger on one of the most enduring images from his story, a picture of pure, selfless dedication. The narrator describes how Elzard would sometimes tend to his young trees by moonlight. Can you picture it? The world is asleep, the landscape bathed in a soft, silvery glow, and this solitary figure is out there, carefully, lovingly nurturing his young trees. There's no one there to watch him, no one to applaud his efforts. It's just him, the moon, and the future forest. This image is so powerful because it captures the essence of his character. His work wasn't a performance. It was a private, sacred act of creation. The moonlight seems symbolic, a quiet, gentle light illuminating a quiet, gentle soul. Under the cover of night, away from the eyes of the world, he was performing a miracle. He was whispering life back into the earth. It speaks to a purity of motive that is incredibly rare. He wasn't seeking fame or fortune. He was simply doing what he believed to be right, what he knew the land needed. He was a guardian in the dark, ensuring that the promise of a new dawn, of a green and vibrant future, would be kept. Elzard Bufir's method was one of purpose. Every action, from sorting the acorns to tending the saplings by moonlight, was deliberate and filled with intention. He shows us that changing the world doesn't always require grand, loud histories. Sometimes it requires the quiet, methodical, and patient work of one person with a deep and abiding faith in the future. His nurseries were not just for trees. They were nurseries of hope. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The story of Elzard's purpose is a lesson that stays with you long after you hear it. If you found this reflection meaningful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. It really helps us grow our community. We'll see you next time as we continue our journey. Hello and welcome back. Today, we journey into Chapter 10, The Wild Frontier, a world both beautiful and brutal, where a young man walks a solitary path toward his destiny. Picture this: Ohio, a sprawling canvas of unbroken forest. The trees stand so thick, so tall, that sunlight struggles to pierce the canopy, dappling the forest floor in an eternal twilight. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sweet perfume of wildflowers. It's a world untouched, where the silence is a physical presence, broken only by the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth or the distant cry of a hawk. Imagine walking for days without seeing another human soul. Your only companions, the ancient trees and the winding, often treacherous, trails. This wasn't a park. It was a wilderness, vast and indifferent. As our traveler presses westward, the landscape shifts. He crosses into Indiana, and the dense forests begin to yield to open prairies and marshlands. Here, the sky opens up, a brilliant, endless blue arching over seas of tall grass that ripple and sway in the wind like waves on an ocean. Pockets of woodland, known as groves, dot the landscape, offering temporary shelter and a break from the relentless sun. The sheer scale of it is humbling. He is a tiny figure in an immense, empty world. The horizon seems to stretch into infinity, a constant, distant promise. The beauty is breathtaking sunsets that paint the entire sky in fiery oranges and purples, and nights so clear the Milky Way looks like a river of diamonds. But this beauty hides a sharp edge. For every moment of awe, there was a corresponding threat. The frontier was not a gentle place. Rather, it was an unpredictable and often violent adversary. One moment, the sun could be shining. The next, the sky would turn a menacing shade of gray, unleashing thunderstorms of incredible ferocity. Lightning would split the sky. Thunder would shake the very ground, and rain would fall in blinding sheets, turning trails into impassable mud pits and swelling creeks into raging torrents. In winter, the cold was a silent killer. Blizzards could sweep across the plains with no warning, burying the landscape in deep snow and dropping temperatures to fatal lows. Without proper shelter, a simple snowstorm was a death sentence. Then there were the animals. This was their kingdom, and humans were intruders. Wolves roamed in packs, their howls echoing through the night, a chilling reminder of one's vulnerability. Bears, powerful and unpredictable, could be encountered in the dense thickets, foraging for berries. More insidious were the smaller dangers. Venomous snakes like the copperhead and rattlesnake, masters of camouflage, waiting silently in the leaf litter. Even the insects could be a torment, with swarms of mosquitoes rising from the marshes, capable of driving a person to madness. Every step required caution, every sound a quick assessment of potential danger. But perhaps the most profound danger was the isolation. Imagine the psychological weight of being utterly alone for weeks, even months on end. There is no one to talk to, no one to share the beauty or the fear with. The silence, at first peaceful, can become oppressive. The mind can play tricks. Every snap of a twig becomes a predator, every shadow a threat. The loneliness is a constant companion, a quiet ache in the heart. Days blur into a routine of walking, foraging, making camp, and sleeping with one ear open. It's a mental and emotional endurance test as much as a physical one. The solitude could break a person, filling them with a desperate, gnawing loneliness that was as dangerous as any wild animal. Yet, in the midst of these hardships, we witness something remarkable. The quiet courage of a man walking alone. This isn't the loud, brash bravery of a storybook hero. It's a deeper, more resilient kind of courage. It's the determination to put one foot in front of the other, day after day, when every instinct might scream to turn back. It has the mental fortitude to face down the fear that gnaws at the edges of your mind in the dead of night. Think of the simple acts that required immense bravery. Waking up before dawn, the air sharp and cold, and forcing yourself out of a makeshift shelter to face another day of uncertainty. It's the courage to cross a rushing river, unsure of its depth or current. It's the resolve to keep going when your muscles ache, your feet are blistered, and your rations are running low. This courage is born not from a lack of fear, but from the will to act in spite of it. It is a testament to the strength of the human spirit when pushed to its absolute limit. He wasn't fighting monsters. He was simply surviving. And in that simple act of survival, there was a profound heroism. This journey was not just a physical trek. It was a deep internal experience, surrounded by the vast, silent wilderness. Our traveler was enveloped in a unique form of poetic solitude. This wasn't just loneliness. It was a state of being that allowed for a deeper connection with the world and with himself. In the silence of the forest, away from the noise and distractions of society, the mind becomes incredibly clear. The rhythmic crunch of his boots on a trail becomes a form of meditation. He observes the world with a heightened sense of awareness, the intricate patterns of frost on a leaf, the way the moonlight filters through the trees, the distant call of a loon across a still lake. This solitude fosters a profound sense of self. He learns to trust his own judgment, to read the signs of the weather in the clouds, to find his way by the stars. He is stripped of all artifice, reduced to his essential self. In this raw, unfiltered state, he confronts his own thoughts, his memories, his hopes, and his fears. The vast emptiness of the landscape mirrors the vastness of his own inner world. It's a deeply personal, almost spiritual communion with nature. He is no longer just an observer of the landscape. He becomes a part of it, his heartbeat syncing with the ancient rhythms of the wild. This poetic solitude shapes him, forging a quiet strength and a deep understanding of his place in the universe. It is a lonely path, but it is also a path to wisdom. And so, our chapter on the wild frontier comes to a close. We've walked alongside this solitary figure, feeling the chill of the wind, the awe of the open sky, and the quiet courage that propelled him forward. It's a powerful reminder of what we are capable of when we step into the unknown. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this exploration, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the life of a true American legend. In our last chapter, we followed John Chapman as he ventured deeper into the untamed wilderness. Today, we're diving into Chapter 11, a part of his story that is often overlooked, but is absolutely crucial to understanding the man he was, his remarkable encounters and relationships with Native American tribes. So, picture this. The early 1800s. The American frontier is a place of tension, conflict, and deep mistrust between settlers and the indigenous peoples whose lands were being encroached upon. It was a dangerous time, and most pioneers traveled with caution, always wary of potential conflict. But John Chapman, or Johnny Appleseed as we know him, was different. He walked a path of peace, and that made all the difference. Unlike many of his contemporaries, John didn't see the wilderness as something to be conquered, or its people as obstacles. He saw a land rich with life and spirit, and he approached its original inhabitants, not with fear, but with an open heart and profound respect. He traveled unarmed, carrying only his sacks of apple seeds, his cooking pot, and his Bible. This simple act alone set him apart. In a world armed to the teeth, his vulnerability was his greatest strength. The native tribes of the Ohio Valley and beyond, including the Shawnee, the Lenape or Delaware, and the Miami, quickly recognized that John was not like the other white men. He wasn't a soldier, a surveyor, or a land speculator. He wanted nothing from them but peaceful coexistence. He learned their customs, respected their territories, and, whenever possible, learned snippets of their languages. He wasn't there to take. He was there to give. This mutual respect formed the foundation of a truly unique relationship. John would often camp near their villages, sharing his food and, of course, his knowledge of apple trees. He would trade seeds and saplings for other goods, or simply give them away as gifts. The tribes, in turn, offered him hospitality, food, and, most importantly, safe passage through their lands. They knew he was a friend. He moved freely through territories that were considered no-go zones for other settlers. Think about how extraordinary that is. While others navigated the frontier with constant anxiety, John walked through it, protected by a shield of kindness and trust. He was welcomed into villages, shared meals around their fires, and listened to their stories. He wasn't just a passerby. He was a welcome guest. But their connection went even deeper than just mutual respect and trade. It moved into the realm of the spiritual. John was a deeply religious man, a follower of the Swedenborgian faith, which emphasized a direct, personal connection with the divine and the spiritual world. He believed that God was present in all of nature and in all people. When he spoke with the Native Americans, he didn't preach at them. He engaged in a genuine exchange of ideas. He found common ground between his own Christian mysticism and their spiritual beliefs, which were deeply intertwined with the natural world. He saw the Great Spirit they spoke of as another name for his God. He respected their shamans and medicine men, seeing them as fellow spiritual seekers. He would read from his Bible, sharing the parables and teachings he held dear, and he would listen intently to their creation stories, their legends, and their understanding of the cosmos. It wasn't a debate or a conversion attempt. It was a conversation between souls. This open-minded spiritual exchange is perhaps the most fascinating part of his story. John recognized the validity and beauty in their beliefs. He saw that they, too, were on a spiritual path, just a different one. This level of tolerance and understanding was incredibly rare for his time. He didn't see them as savages in need of saving, as many did. He saw them as brothers and sisters on the same earth, under the same sky. Because of his unique character, his gentle nature, his simple lifestyle, and his spiritual origins began to grow around him among the tribes. Some stories say that many native people saw him as a holy man or a great medicine man. They believed he was touched by the Great Spirit. Why else would a man wander the wilderness alone, unarmed, simply planting trees for future generations he would never meet? His actions were so selfless, so disconnected from the greed and violence they had come to associate with the settlers, that they could only be interpreted as divinely inspired. They saw how he interacted with nature. He wouldn't harm animals, not even a snake. He would douse his own campfire if he saw insects being drawn into the flames. This profound respect for all living things aligned perfectly with their own values. They recognized him as a man who walked in harmony with the world, not against it. This perception of him as a holy figure granted him an almost mythical status and ensured his safety wherever he went. There are numerous accounts and oral traditions that support this. One famous story tells of how John arrived at a village to warn them of an impending attack by American soldiers. He had run 4 miles to deliver the message, asking for nothing in return. His only motive was to prevent bloodshed. This act solidified his reputation as a true friend, a man who valued life above all else, regardless of who it belonged to. His legacy of peace is a powerful counter-narrative to the often violent history of the American frontier. He proved that it was possible for different cultures to meet not with conflict, but with curiosity and compassion. He showed that a single individual, armed with nothing but goodwill, could build bridges where others built walls. John Chapman's relationship with Native American tribes wasn't just a footnote in his life. It was central to his identity and his mission. It allowed him to travel the vast distances he did and to plant his seeds of peace and apple blossoms across the land. He wasn't just Johnny Appleseed, the quirky planter of trees. He was a diplomat of the heart, a spiritual ambassador, and a living testament to the power of kindness. His story reminds us that respect is a universal language, and that the strongest protection you can have is a reputation for being a good and decent human being. It's a beautiful and inspiring part of his legend, and one that deserves to be remembered and celebrated. He saw the humanity in everyone he met, and in return, they saw the gentle, wandering spirit that made him a legend. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The story of Johnny Appleseed is filled with so many incredible layers, and this one is truly special. If you enjoyed this, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss our next chapter. We have many more miles to travel with this American icon. Until next time, take care and walk in peace. Hello, and welcome back to our journey through the lives of those who walked a different path. Today, we delve into a truly remarkable story. Chapter 12. A Man of Simple Means. This isn't just a tale about living with less. It's about a profound spiritual conviction that completely reshaped a man's existence, teaching us a powerful lesson about where true contentment can be found. So, grab a warm drink, get comfortable ironically, something our subject would have kindly refused, and let's explore this incredible life. Imagine a man who had the means to live in comfort, to have a warm bed, sturdy shoes, and a roof over his head every single night. Now, imagine him willingly turning his back on all of it. This is the heart of our story. He wasn't forced into hardship. He chose it. He saw the comforts and luxuries of the world, not as blessings, but as barriers. To him, a soft bed was a distraction, a lavish meal, a detour from a more important journey. He actively refused what most of us actively seek. When offered a place in a fine house, he would politely decline, preferring the open sky. When given new clothes, he would often pass them on to someone he felt needed them more. This wasn't a performance or a temporary phase. It was a deeply ingrained philosophy that governed every moment of his life. His friends and family were often bewildered. Why would anyone choose such a hard life? But for him, the question was the opposite. How could anyone choose a life cluttered with things that pulled them away from what truly mattered? His commitment to simplicity went to extremes that are almost unimaginable to us today. One of the most striking examples was his habit of sleeping outdoors, regardless of the season. While others huddled by their fires on cold winter nights, he would find shelter under a simple overhang or even just beneath the stars, feeling the crisp, cold air on his face. He believed that by experiencing the world in its raw, unfiltered state, he was experiencing God's creation more directly. There was no barrier of stone or wood between him and the heavens. Even more astonishing was his practice of walking barefoot, even in the dead of winter. The sharp sting of frozen ground, the bite of snow against his skin, these weren't punishments to be endured. He saw them as powerful, humbling reminders of his own humanity and his dependence on a higher power. It was a physical act of devotion, a way of stripping away every possible layer of comfort to stand exposed, humble, and open before his Creator. Can you imagine that level of conviction? To feel the frost on the ground and see it not as a threat, but as a sacred connection. It is a testament to a faith so profound that it redefined the very meaning of comfort and hardship. So, What was the driving force behind such an austere life? It was a single, powerful belief. Simplicity brought him closer to God. In his mind, the accumulation of possessions, the pursuit of luxury, and the constant search for physical comfort were all distractions. They were noise. They filled up the spaces in our lives where silence and contemplation should be. By shedding these layers of material attachment, he believed he was creating a quiet, empty space, within himself a space, where he could finally hear the gentle whisper of the divine. He saw a direct correlation. The less he owned, the more room he had for faith. The less he focused on his own physical ease, the more he could focus on his spiritual well-being. It wasn't about self-punishment. It was about purity. He was deliberately clearing the path between his soul and God, removing every obstacle, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. For him, a simple meal was a feast of gratitude. A cold night was an exercise in trust, and an empty room was a cathedral. This perspective transforms the idea of poverty from a state of lack to a state of spiritual abundance. He had found a secret that many of us miss. The less you desire from the world, the more you can receive from the Spirit. Ultimately, his life stands as a powerful and enduring lesson. A lesson about finding peace in less, not more. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with messages telling us that happiness is just one more purchase away. A new phone, a bigger house, a faster car. We are taught to accumulate, to upgrade, to constantly strive for more. We fill our lives, our homes, and our schedules to the brim. And yet, so many of us feel a persistent sense of emptiness, a quiet dissatisfaction. This man's story offers a radical alternative. It suggests that perhaps we are looking in the wrong direction. Perhaps peace isn't found in adding more, but in taking away. By simplifying our lives, we can reduce the noise, the stress, and the constant pressure to keep up. We can create space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to connect with ourselves, with the people we love, and with whatever higher purpose we believe in. His life teaches us that true wealth isn't measured by what you have in your bank account, but by the richness of your inner world. It's about discovering that a quiet walk in nature can be more fulfilling than a shopping spree, and that a moment of silent gratitude can bring more joy than any possession. It's a challenging idea, but a liberating one. The peace we are all searching for might not be out there waiting to be bought. It might be right here, buried under all the things we think we need. His journey was an extreme example, but the principle is universal. By embracing a little more simplicity, we might just find a lot more peace. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this incredible story of faith and simplicity. It really makes you think about what's truly important in our own lives, doesn't it? If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more journeys into inspiring lives. Your support means the world and helps us continue to share these powerful stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What is one thing you could simplify in your life to find a little more peace? Until next time, take care and stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through American folklore. Today, we delve into a fascinating chapter where a real man, John Chapman, begins to transform into the larger-than-life figure we know as Johnny Appleseed. This is the story of how a legend is born. Imagine the American frontier in the early 1800s. It's a vast, rugged landscape, and communication travels slowly, carried by pioneers, traders, and travelers moving from one settlement to the next. It's in this environment that whispers first began to circulate about a peculiar man wandering the wilderness. A man who walked barefoot, wore a burlap sack for a shirt, and carried a pouch filled not with gold or ammunition, but with apple seeds. These weren't just whispers. There were stories shared around crackling fires and lonely cabins, tales that grew with each telling. Settlers would speak of a kind-hearted man who appeared as if from nowhere, offering seeds and saplings that would one day provide fruit for their children and cider for their tables. He asked for nothing in return but a place to sleep for the Nithoffen, preferring the floor by the hearth or a spot in the barn. He was described as a friend to all living things. Stories were told of him freeing a wolf from a trap or sleeping peacefully through a winter storm with a bear and her cubs. sharing his meager food with them. He was a man who seemed to be at one with the untamed wilderness, not fighting against it, but living in harmony with it. He carried no weapon, believing it was a sin to harm any of God's creatures. His only defense was his gentle nature and the goodwill he spread wherever he went. Children, especially, were captivated by these tales. For them, Johnny Appleseed was a figure straight out of a fairy tale. A kind of frontier saint or a magical woodsman. They would gather close to their parents at night, their eyes wide with wonder, listening to stories of his adventures. Did he really wear a cooking pot as a hat? Did he truly talk to animals? Did he really sleep in the snow without a blanket and never feel the cold? These stories sparked their imaginations, turning the lonely, often frightening, wilderness into a place of wonder, a place where a gentle man planted seeds of hope. The legend wasn't just confined to oral tradition. As the frontier became more settled, small-town newspapers began to pick up on the stories. Editors, always on the lookout for a good human interest piece, started publishing articles about this eccentric wanderer. They wrote about his tireless mission to bring apple orchards to the Ohio Valley and beyond. They detailed his simple lifestyle, his deep religious faith, and his unwavering kindness. One early account might describe a travelers encounter. Met a man today on the road to Mansfield, known only as Johnny Appleseed. His feet were bare and tough as leather, his eyes as clear and bright as a summer sky. He offered me a handful of seeds and spoke of the beautiful orchards that would one day dot this land. A most peculiar but benevolent soul. Another article might focus on his spiritual beliefs, explaining how he saw his work as a divine calling, spreading not just apples, but also pages from his well-worn Bible. He would tear his book into sections, leaving a few pages with one family and the rest with another, promising to return later to swap them, thus ensuring the word of God was shared as widely as his apple seeds. These newspaper articles served to legitimize the campfire stories. They took the scattered oral accounts and solidified them into a more cohesive narrative, broadcasting it to a much wider audience. People in established towns in the East began to read about this strange figure on the western frontier. He became a symbol of the rugged individualism, the pioneering spirit, and the simple faith that many Americans held dear. This is the crucial point where the man, John Chapman, and the myth, Johnny Appleseed, truly began to merge. The real-life details of his journey, his business acumen in establishing nurseries, his land claims, his actual, documented travels started to blend with the more fantastical elements of the oral tradition. The man who was a savvy nurseryman became the barefoot saint who talked to animals. The practical planter became a mythical figure who embodied the spirit of the American frontier. He was no longer just a man planting trees. He was an hiver. He represented generosity in a harsh world, peace in a time of conflict, and a deep, spiritual connection to the land. People began to see him not just as a person they might have met, but as a living legend, a part of the very landscape he was helping to shape. The stories gave people hope. In a life filled with hardship, the idea that a man so pure of heart was walking among them was a comforting thought. His legend became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because people believed he was kind and harmless, they welcomed him. Because they expected stories, they remembered and embellished every unusual detail of his visits. He would arrive in a settlement, and by the time he left, a new chapter in the Johnny Appleseed saga had already been written, ready to be told and retold. And so, the legend grew, seed by seed, story by story. It spread across Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and beyond, carried on the wind like the apple blossoms he so loved. John Chapman was still out there, a real man walking the earth. But Johnny Appleseed, a folk hero, was now walking alongside him, growing taller and more mythical with every step. The man was planting orchards, but the stories were planting a legend in the heart of a young nation. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the story. It's a powerful reminder of how our heroes are made, not just by their actions, but by the stories we tell about them. If you're enjoying this series, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do you and miss the next chapter in the incredible life of Johnny Appleseed. See you next time. Gentle, thoughtful music begins, then fades to a low background hum. Hello, and welcome back. Today, we delve into a chapter that feels like a warm embrace on a cool evening. Chapter 14, The Gentle Philosopher. We find our wanderer not in search of a destination, but in the quiet pursuit of connection, embodying a philosophy not written in books, but lived in every shared glance and spoken word. Imagine him now, seated on a fallen log, the air crisp with the scent of pine. A fellow traveler, a stranger just moments before, sits across from him. There's no grand lecture, no imposing doctrine. Instead, the conversation unfolds as naturally as a fern. He might start with a simple question. Have you ever noticed how the light filters through the leaves right before sunset? And from this small observation, a universe of thought opens up. They talk about faith, not as a rigid structure, but as the trust a seed has in the soil. They discuss the quiet resilience of the forest, how it bends in the wind, but rarely breaks. A lesson in strength and flexibility. His voice, we're told, was a comfort in itself. It wasn't loud or commanding, but had a gentle resonance, like the hum of the earth. He spoke of love, not as a fleeting passion, but as the constant, nourishing force that connects all living things the way the river gives itself to the sea, or the way the moon faithfully pulls the tides. He didn't preach, he wondered. He would ask, "What does love mean to you?" And then he would simply listen. Truly listen, with an open heart. He made people feel seen, not for what they did or what they owned, but for the quiet truths they held within. In these conversations, strangers found a piece of themselves they thought was lost, or perhaps never knew they had. They left not with answers, but with better questions, and a profound sense of peace. As dusk settled, the heart of his world would come alive. The campfire. This was his cathedral, his classroom, his stage. Flames danced, casting long, moving shadows on the trees, and the crackle of burning wood provided the evening's percussion. One by one, others would be drawn to the light and the warmth. A small community forged for a single night. This is where the gentle philosopher truly shone. He was a master storyteller. His tales weren't grand epics of heroes and dragons, but small, intimate stories of everyday magic. He'd tell the story of a grumpy old baker who learned to smile again after a child gifted him a misshapen flower, or the one about a tiny stream that dreamed of becoming an ocean, and how, by joining with other streams, it eventually reached its goal. Each story was a parable, a gentle lesson wrapped in a captivating narrative. He would pause, letting the fire crack and pop, allowing the meaning to settle into the hearts of his listeners. He had a way of looking at each person around the fire, making them feel like the story was just for them. His eyes would twinkle with the reflected firelight, filled with a genuine joy for the simple act of sharing. The warmth of the flames was matched only by the warmth radiating from his presence. He wasn't just telling stories. He was weaving a blanket of shared experience, stitching together the souls of those who gathered around his fire. In that circle of light, anxieties melted away, replaced by a sense of belonging and quiet joy. The comfort he brought was profound. People came to him carrying heavy burdens, worries about the future, regrets from the past. He didn't offer easy solutions or hollow platitudes. Instead, he offered his presence. He would sit with them in their silence, a hand on a shoulder, a shared cup of tea. His calm was infectious. He had a way of framing problems, not as insurmountable walls, but as winding paths. The trail is steep here, he might say, but look at the view we're getting. He helped people see the beauty in their struggles, the strength in their vulnerability. His voice was the key. It was a balm for weary souls. Imagine hearing a voice that holds no judgment, only acceptance. A voice that speaks of hope without being naive, that acknowledges pain without dwelling in it. He spoke of nature as the ultimate healer, encouraging people to simply sit and watch the clouds, or listen to the birdsong. He reminded them that, like the seasons, our own sorrows have a rhythm and will eventually pass. He didn't take away their pain, but he gave them the strength and perspective to carry it, until it naturally lightened. He was a living reminder that it's okay to not be okay, and that there is immense grace in simply being present with what is. The comfort he offered was not a temporary fix. It was a deep, resonant peace that people carried with them long after they had parted ways. And this brings us to the heart of the chapter, reflection. How does kindness become a form of immortality? The gentle philosopher owned nothing, He built no monuments. He wrote no books. By the world's standards, he would leave nothing behind. And yet, he achieved a legacy more lasting than stone or steel. His immortality lies in the echoes of his kindness. Think about it. The stranger he comforted on the trail carries that feeling of peace for the rest of his life. Perhaps, in a moment of stress years later, he remembers the philosopher's calm voice and chooses patience instead of anger with his own child. That child, in turn, learns a lesson in gentleness. The story shared around the campfire inspires someone to be more generous, and that act of generosity ripples outwards, touching lives the philosopher would never meet. His kindness wasn't a single act. It was a seed planted in the heart of everyone he encountered. These seeds grew into forests of compassion, spreading and self-propagating through generations. His immortality isn't about his name being remembered. It's about his spirit living on through the actions of others. It's in every quiet conversation about faith and love, in every story shared to bring comfort, in every moment someone chooses empathy over judgment. Kindness, in its purest form, becomes a living energy. It cannot be destroyed, it can only be passed on. The gentle philosopher understood this. He wasn't trying to live forever. He was trying to live well, to love well, and to give freely of the one thing he had in abundance, his gentle spirit. And in doing so, he became woven into the fabric of the world, as immortal as the stories whispered on the wind and the warmth shared around a flickering flame. His life is a beautiful testament to the fact that the greatest legacies are not what we build for ourselves, but what we cultivate in others. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through Chapter 14. It is a chapter that invites us to reflect on our own impact and the quiet power of a gentle heart. If these stories resonate with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more reflections. It truly helps us continue to share these messages. Until next time, be well and be kind. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey. Today, we arrive at the final chapter of a remarkable life. Chapter 15, The Later Years. It's a story not of an ending, but of a quiet, profound culmination, a testament to a life dedicated to planting seeds for a future he might not fully see. As the years etched deeper lines upon his face, and his steps grew a little slower, his spirit remained as untamed as the frontier he had called home for so long. Even as his body began to feel the weight of countless seasons, his heart still pulled him toward the open spaces. You could still find him wandering the familiar paths, his gaze sweeping across the vast landscapes. His hair, now the color of snow on a winter morning, would catch the breeze as he stood on a ridge, overlooking the valleys he had helped to shape. He was no longer the young, tireless pioneer of his early days. But the land knew him. The birds seemed to sing a familiar tune. The rustling leaves whispered his name. Each journey, even a short walk to the edge of the woods, was a pilgrimage. It was a quiet conversation with the world he had poured his soul into. His hands, though gnarled with age, would still run along the rough bark of a tree or sift through the rich soil. A familiar, comforting gesture. He wasn't conquering the frontier anymore. He was simply being with it, a part of its enduring story. An old friend visiting another. The fire that had driven him across uncharted territories had mellowed, transforming into a steady, warm glow of contentment. One of the most beautiful legacies of his life was found in the orchards. The apple trees he had planted as a young man. Their branches, once thin and vulnerable, now stood as mighty sentinels on the hillsides. Their boughs, heavy with fruit, reached towards the sky, a living monument to his foresight and labor. These weren't just trees. They were a promise, fulfilled. He'd often walk among them, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground. He'd watch his children, the grandchildren of his neighbors and friends, scampered through the rows, their laughter echoing through the air as they reached for a ripe, red apple. The fruits of his labor were literally feeding new generations. The harvest from these orchards became a cornerstone of the community. Families gathered to pick the fruit, their baskets overflowing. The sweet scent of apples filled the autumn air, a fragrance of abundance and continuity. He saw the jams being made, the pies being baked, the simple joy that came from a harvest sown decades earlier. He had planted more than seeds in the ground. He had planted community, sustenance, and a connection to the land that would outlive him. It was a powerful, humbling sight to witness the ripples of his actions spreading so far, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined all those years ago. His legacy wasn't carved in stone. It was alive, growing, and sweet to the taste. Of course, the passage of time is an undeniable force. As the years advanced, his physical strength began to wane. There were days when the familiar aches were harder to ignore, when the long walks became shorter strolls. His body, which had served him so faithfully through hardship and toil, was finally asking for rest. Simple tasks that were once effortless now required a bit more concentration, a bit more effort. He had to lean more on the community he had helped build, accepting the care and support that was now so freely offered to him. Yet, as his physical health declined, something remarkable happened. His spirit, far from dimming, seemed to burn even brighter. It was as if all the energy that once went into physical labor was now channeled into a quiet, luminous wisdom. His eyes, though perhaps not as sharp as they once were, held a deep, knowing sparkle. He became the keeper of stories, the living history of the region. His porch became a gathering place, where people came not just for advice, but for the simple comfort of his presence. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his words were measured, kind, and full of a perspective that only a long life can provide. He found joy in the smallest things: the warmth of the morning sun, the taste of fresh water, the sound of a familiar voice. His body was frail, but his spirit remained unshakable. Radiant force. In his final years, he was the embodiment of quiet dignity. There was no grand fanfare, no final, dramatic act. Instead, his life settled into a gentle, rhythmic grace. His days were marked by simple routines and peaceful reflection. He had lived through immense change, had faced down incredible challenges, and had built a life from scratch in a wild land. He had loved, lost, and endured, and through it all, he had maintained a fundamental goodness, a deep-seated integrity that was as solid as the mountains on the horizon. His was a life well lived, not because of wealth or fame, but because of its purpose and its impact. He showed us that a single person, with dedication and a hopeful heart, can leave an indelible mark on the world. He taught us that the greatest legacies are not things we own, but things we nurture: family, community, and a connection to the earth. As he sat on his porch, looking out at the world he had helped create, there was a profound peace about him. It was the quiet dignity of a man who knew he had given his best, who had planted his trees, and who could now rest, knowing that the orchard would continue to flourish for generations to come. His story is a gentle reminder that a life of substance and meaning is the greatest achievement of all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through his later years. It's been an honor to share this story with you. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the life of a true American original. We've walked with John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, across the sprawling frontier. We've seen him plant not just seeds, but hope, kindness, and a vision for a settled, fruitful land. Today, we arrive at the final chapter of his earthly story, a chapter that marks not an end, but a transformation the moment. The man became a legend. By the early 1840s, Johnny was well into his 70s. The world he had helped to shape was changing rapidly. The wild frontier he first encountered was now dotted with towns, farms, and bustling communities. The saplings he had planted decades earlier were now mature, fruit-bearing orchards, their branches heavy with apples every autumn. He was a familiar, beloved figure, instantly recognizable in his coffee-sack tunic, his cooking pot hat, and his bare feet, toughened by thousands of miles of travel. He was no longer just a wandering nurseryman. He was a living piece of folklore, a welcome guest at any cabin, a friend to settlers and Native Americans alike. His final years were spent mostly in the area around Fort Wayne, Indiana. He had established numerous nurseries there and continued his work, though perhaps at a slightly slower pace. His spirit, however, remained as vibrant as ever. He still carried his Swedenborgian books, sharing his gentle faith and his deep love for all of God's creation with anyone who would listen. He still told stories to wide-eyed children, his voice a comforting presence by the hearth fire. He was a constant, a reassuring link to the past, in a world hurtling toward the future. The end came in March of 1845, as peacefully and quietly as he had lived his life. The exact date is debated, but the story of his passing has been passed down through generations. According to the most widely accepted account, Johnny was visiting the home of his friend, William Worth, near Fort Wayne. He had walked some 15 miles through a cold, sleety rain. Two worn settlers of a potential Denasia testament to his unwavering sense of duty, even in his final days. Upon arriving at the Worth cabin, chilled and exhausted, he accepted their hospitality. He declined a warm bed inside, preferring, as he often did, to sleep on the floor by the fire. He ate a simple meal of bread and milk, read aloud from his Bible as was his custom, and lay down to rest. Sometime during the night, he developed what was then called winter plague, likely pneumonia. He passed away quietly, without fuss or fanfare. It was a gentle departure for a gentle soul. The man who had walked the earth with such purpose had simply laid down his earthly burdens and continued on his spiritual journey. There was no grand ceremony, no monument erected immediately. His burial was simple, attended by the local families who had known and loved him. They laid him to rest in a small cemetery, the Archer Cemetery, near the St. Joseph River. News of his death spread slowly, traveling from cabin to cabin, town to town, carried by the very people whose lives he had touched. And as the news traveled, so did the stories. People began to share their memories of this eccentric, kind-hearted man. They remembered the times he'd arrived at their door, a sack of seeds on his back, offering not just for money, but for a simple meal, a piece of old clothing, or sometimes just a promise to care for the trees. One settler recalled how Johnny would never harm a living creature, once even putting out his own campfire and moving to a colder spot because he noticed mosquitoes flying into the flames. Another told of how he would buy worn-out horses destined for the slaughterhouse, nurse them back to health, and then give them to families who needed a work animal, asking only that they treat the horse with kindness. Parents remembered his magical effect on their children, how he'd gather them around and tell fantastic stories, his eyes twinkling with a wisdom that seemed older than the trees themselves. These weren't just anecdotes. They were testimonials to his character. They painted a picture of a man who lived his philosophy of universal love every single day. And then, as if nature itself wanted to pay tribute, something beautiful happened. That spring of 1845, the apple trees across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois bloomed with an almost supernatural abundance. From the Ohio River Valley to the shores of the Great Lakes, the landscape was awash in a sea of pink and white blossoms. It was a breathtaking sight, a fragrant memorial to the man who had brought them there. For the settlers, it felt like a final gift from Johnny Appleseed. It was as if his spirit had dispersed on the wind, touching every tree he had ever planted, coaxing from them one last, glorious farewell. The blossoms were a symbol of the life he had cultivated, a life of simple beauty, of quiet perseverance, and of abundant generosity. The apples that followed that autumn were a tangible legacy, feeding the families he had cared so much about. This is the point where the man, John Chapman, truly and fully became the legend Johnny Appleseed. His life story, already remarkable, began to take on a mythical quality. To real man with his bare feet, his coffee sack clothes, and his deep, gentle faith merged with the larger-than-life folk hero. He became a symbol of the American pioneer spirit, not the spirit of conquest, but the spirit of cultivation. He represented hard work, a deep connection to the land, and the idea that one person, with a simple mission and a kind heart, could leave an indelible mark on the world. His legacy wasn't written in history books at first. It was written on the land itself, in the gnarled trunks of old apple trees. It was spoken in the stories told around the dinner table. He became an embodiment of peace, of harmony with nature, and of selfless service to others. While other pioneers were clearing forests, he was planting them. While others sought wealth and fame, he sought only to share what he had. Today, the legend of Johnny Appleseed endures. He's more than just a character in a children's book. He's a foundational part of the American story. He reminds us that greatness doesn't always come with a loud roar, but can arrive quietly, on bare feet, with a pocket full of seeds and a heart full of love. His passing was not an end, but a blossoming, the final. Beautiful act in a life dedicated to planting for the future. He left behind a sweeter, more fruitful world, and a story that continues to inspire us to this day. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter in the incredible life of Johnny Appleseed. I hope his story has brought you a little bit of inspiration. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome back to our series. Today, in Chapter 17, we're diving into a fascinating transformation. How real, complex history gets spun into the gold of folklore. We'll explore how the story of a real person can shift and change, becoming larger than life, especially as it happened for so many figures in the late 1800s and early 1900s. This was a pivotal time, an era of nation building and identity forging, and it needed heroes, but not necessarily the complicated, messy heroes of real life. It needed legends. So, how does a person become a myth? It often starts with the kernel of truth, a real individual who did remarkable things, lived a life that captured the imagination, but as time passes, the specific, gritty details begin to fade. The first-hand accounts are replaced by stories told around a campfire, then by stories written down, each one adding a new layer of polish, a new bit of exaggeration. Think about the late 19th century. America was expanding, industrializing, and looking back at its recent past, the frontier era, with a sense of nostalgia and romance. The wild, untamed wilderness was becoming a thing of the past, and the people who had lived in it were being reimagined as titans. This is where the story truly takes a turn. The historical figure, once a person with bills to pay, with good days and bad, with fears and flaws, starts to get sanded down. Their complexities are smoothed away, and they're reborn in the pages of children's books and collections of tall tales. Suddenly, a skilled frontiersman who is good at his job becomes a man who can wrestle a bear, outrun a locomotive, or carry a whole forest on his back. The narrative shifts from what he did to what he represented. He becomes a symbol of courage, of independence, of the untamable American spirit. These stories weren't concerned with historical accuracy. They were concerned with inspiration and entertainment. They were creating a new American mythology, populated by heroes who embodied the nation's most cherished ideals. Children's literature played a massive role in this. When you simplify a story for a young audience, you naturally focus on the most dramatic and easily understandable elements. The nuanced political or economic reasons for a person's actions are often left out. Instead, you get a simple morality tale. Good versus evil. Courage versus fear. The real person's life is simplified into a fairy tale arc. He wasn't just a man who traveled a lot. He was a restless wanderer with a noble purpose. He wasn't just a farmer. He was a gentle soul who made the wilderness bloom. This simplification makes the story more accessible and more powerful in a different way. It turns a historical anecdote into a timeless lesson, a character into an archetype. This process is a double-edged sword. On one hand, something is lost. The real, breathing, complicated human being is obscured, replaced by a caricature, a two-dimensional cutout. We lose the chance to learn from their actual struggles, their failures, their very human contradictions. The historical record becomes muddied, and it can be difficult for later generations to separate the man from the myth that has grown up around him. We risk forgetting that our heroes were people, just like us, who faced incredible challenges with the tools they had at hand, not with superhuman abilities. The real story of their resilience can be even more inspiring than the told tale. But on the other hand, something powerful is gained. This transformation into folklore is a form of cultural preservation. While the dry facts of history might be confined to dusty textbooks, a good story has legs, a tall tale, a children's book, a folk song. These things travel. They are told and retold, keeping the name and the spirit of the person alive for centuries. Storytelling has this incredible power to distill the essence of a person's legacy and transmit it across generations. The myth ensures that the memory doesn't just survive, it thrives. It becomes part of the cultural DNA, a shared story that helps define who we are as a people. Think about it. The folklore version is often how we first encounter these historical figures. We hear the myth as children, and it sparks our imagination. It's that larger-than-life story that makes us curious to learn more. The legend serves as a gateway to the history. It's the colorful, exciting cover that invites you to open the book and read the more detailed, nuanced chapters inside. The folklore isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a conversation with the past. It keeps the flame of memory burning, ensuring that we never completely forget the people who shaped our world, even if we remember them in a way that's a little more magical than the reality. So, the journey from history to folklore isn't just a process of simplification or exaggeration. It's a testament to the enduring power of a great story. It shows us how we, as a culture, select and shape narratives to reflect our values, our aspirations, and our need for heroes. The historical figure provides the seed, but it is the collective imagination of a nation that makes it grow into a towering tree of myth. The real person may be gone, but their story, transformed and magnified, becomes immortal. It's a beautiful, if complicated, process where memory is not just preserved, but reborn. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of history and folklore. It's a fascinating subject that reminds us that the stories we tell matter. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the past. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We've journeyed far in our story, tracing the footsteps of a man who seemed more myth than reality. Today, in our final chapter, we look beyond the man himself to the world he left behind. This is chapter 18. The Appletree Legacy. When we think of legacies, we often picture monuments of stone or towering skyscrapers. But some legacies are living, breathing things. They grow from the earth, sway in the wind, and feed future generations. This is the legacy we're talking about today, a legacy written in roots and branches, spread across an entire continent. It is the story of how one man's simple obsession with apple seeds forever changed the American landscape. Let's start with the ecological impact. In an age where we talk a lot about monocultures and the fragility of our food systems, the work done over 2 centuries ago offers a powerful lesson. He wasn't just planting apple trees, he was planting genetic diversity. The apples he cultivated were not the sweet, uniform varieties you find in a modern supermarket. No, his apples were a wild, unpredictable mix. They were cider apples, cooking apples, apples for drying, apples for animal feed each. One a unique genetic puzzle. Think about it. Every seed from an apple, when planted, grows into a completely new and distinct tree. It doesn't grow true to seed. This means that every one of the countless seeds he planted was a roll of the genetic dice. He was, in essence, conducting one of the largest, most uncontrolled agricultural experiments in history. He was spreading a vast library of apple DNA across the frontier. This incredible diversity was a form of resilience. If a blight or a pest targeted one type of apple tree, there were thousands of other genetically different trees that might survive. He was building a robust, adaptable ecosystem, one seedling at a time. He wasn't just planting orchards, he was planting a genetic ark. So, how vast was this living legacy? It's almost impossible to calculate with perfect accuracy, but the estimates are staggering. Historians believe he was responsible for planting nurseries that covered well over 1,200 acres across what we now know as Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. An acre can hold hundreds of saplings. Do the math, and you're looking at millions upon millions of trees that got their start thanks to his efforts. Think about the Midwest today. Drive through the countryside in Ohio or Indiana, and you might see an old, gnarled apple tree standing alone in a field or at the edge of a forest. There is a very real chance that tree is a direct descendant of one planted over 200 years ago from a nursery he established. His work wasn't just for the settlers of his time. It was a gift to the future. Those trees provided food, cider, and a connection to the homes the settlers had left behind. They were a vital part of the frontier economy and culture. His network of nurseries was the original source for so much of the apple stock that would populate the heartland of America. His trees became the ancestors of countless family orchards and, eventually, a burgeoning commercial industry. This brings us to a moment of reflection. How can one person's quiet, unassuming work have such a monumental impact? He wasn't a general, a president, or a wealthy industrialist. He was a wanderer, a man with a singular focus, who walked thousands of miles with a bag of seeds. His story is a profound reminder that you don't need power or fame to change the world. Sometimes, all it takes is persistent, dedicated action, guided by a simple, powerful idea. His life was a testament to the power of small, consistent efforts accumulating over time. Each seed planted was a tiny act of faith. Each nursery established was a small investment in a future he would never fully see. He wasn't seeking recognition. By all accounts, he was a humble man, content with his mission. And yet, by pursuing his passion, he fundamentally altered the agricultural and cultural landscape of a continent. He helped tame a wilderness, not with an axe, but with a seed. He brought a symbol of civilization and domesticity to the wild frontier, making it more hospitable for those who followed. His legacy proves that a life of quiet purpose can echo louder through history than one spent shouting for attention. Finally, let's consider the symbolism of the apple tree itself. For centuries, across many cultures, the apple tree has been a powerful symbol of peace, knowledge, and abundance. In the context of the American frontier, this symbolism took on a new, profound meaning. For the pioneers carving out a life in a new, often harsh land, planting an apple orchard was an act of optimism. It was a declaration that they were here to stay. It was a promise of future harvests, of cider in the winter, of shade in the summer. An apple tree is not a crop you plant and harvest in a single season. It's a commitment. It's putting down roots, both literally and figuratively. The orchards he inspired became centers of community life. They were places of peace and sustenance. The blooming trees in spring were a sign of renewal and hope. The autumn harvest was a time for celebration and gratitude. In a landscape often defined by struggle and survival, the apple tree stood as a symbol of prosperity and stability. It represented the transformation of wilderness into home. He wasn't just planting trees. He was planting symbols of peace and abundance. He was sowing the seeds of civilization, helping to create a gentler, more fruitful world. His legacy is not just in the fruit we eat, but in the enduring ideals of hope, persistence, and the quiet, life-giving power of nature. And so, the story of this remarkable man concludes not with his death, but with the endless life he left behind. A living, breathing legacy that continues to bear fruit, to provide shade, and to remind us that one person, with a simple mission and a deep love for the land, can indeed change the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. I hope this story has inspired you as much as it has inspired me. If you enjoyed this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the fascinating stories that have shaped our world. It really helps a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Start a script. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're rewrapping up our journey with a figure who is as much a part of American folklore as he was a real, live-in person. We're talking about the one and only Johnny Appleseed, and we're asking a big question. What does he mean to us today? Why does his story still resonate, centuries after he walked the earth? So, who was Johnny Appleseed? Really, we know the basics. A man named John Chapman who wandered the American frontier planting apple trees. But his legacy is so much more than just a nursery rhyme. He was a pioneer, not just of the land, but of an idea of kindness, generosity, and a deep, abiding respect for nature. Think about it. In an era defined by expansion and often the exploitation of the land, here was a man who moved gently through it. He wasn't conquering the wilderness. He was nurturing it. He was planting orchards, not just for himself, but for the settlers who would follow, for communities he might never even see. This wasn't just horticulture. It was an act of profound kindness. His influence on the American spirit of generosity is subtle, but undeniable. He represents that quiet, selfless goodness. We all aspire to the idea of doing something good simply because it is the right thing to do. And that brings us to conservation. Long before environmentalism was a common term, John Chapman was living it. He saw the land not as something to be tamed, but as a partner. His practice of planting from seed, rather than grafting, created diverse, resilient orchards that were perfectly adapted to their local environments. These weren't the sweet, uniform apples we find in supermarkets today. They were hardy, often tart, and incredibly versatile, perfect for cider, vinegar, and livestock feed, which were essentials for a frontier life. He was, in his own way, a master of biodiversity and a pioneer of sustainable agriculture. He showed that you could work with nature, not against it, to build a better future. Now, let's talk about the spiritual side of Johnny Appleseed. John Chapman was a deeply religious man, a missionary for the Swedenborgian Church, but his spirituality wasn't confined to a building. For him, the divine was present in every leaf, every stream, every buzzing bee. His faith was intertwined with his love for the natural world. He saw planting trees as a holy act, a way of spreading beauty and bounty as a reflection of a benevolent creator. In today's world, where many of us feel disconnected from nature, his life is a powerful reminder that there's something sacred in the soil, something profound in the simple act of planting a seed and watching it grow. This modern interpretation sees him not just as a Christian missionary, but as a spiritual ecologist, a man who found his church in the great, green cathedral of the American wilderness. Of course, over time, the man, John Chapman, has become intertwined with the myth of Johnny Appleseed. He's this larger-than-life figure, a mythic hero striding across the continent with a pot on his head and a sack of seeds on his back. He's often portrayed as this simple, almost childlike character, at one with animals, walking barefoot through the seasons. This image makes him accessible, a friendly folk hero for children's stories. It captures his gentle spirit and his connection to the wild. But there's another side to his image. The humble naturalist. The real John Chapman was a shrewd businessman, an experienced nurseryman, and an incredibly resilient frontiersman. He was a man of flesh and blood who faced hardship, loneliness, and the very real dangers of the wilderness. He was both a dreamer and a pragmatist. This dual-image mythic hero and humble naturalist is what makes him so enduring. He's aspirational, yet relatable. We can marvel at the legend, while also admiring the determination of the real man who made it all possible. He shows us that ordinary people can lead extraordinary lives. So, what is the ultimate lesson from the life of Johnny Appleseed? For me, it's the most powerful one of all. Planting hope, even when you know you might never see it bloom. John Chapman planted trees that would take years, even decades, to mature and bear fruit. He was creating a legacy for a future he would not be a part of. He was investing in generations he would never meet. Think about that in the context of our own lives. How often do we get discouraged if we don't see immediate results? We live in a world of instant gratification, but the most meaningful things in life, building a community, fighting for a cause, raising a family, healing our planet, take time. They require patience, faith, and a willingness to work for a future we may not personally get to enjoy. Johnny Appleseed teaches us to be good ancestors. He teaches us that our actions today, no matter how small they seem, can ripple outwards and create a better world for those who come after us. Every kind word, every tree planted, every effort to leave this world a little better than we found it, is a seed of hope. It's an act of faith in the future. His story isn't just about apples. It's about legacy. It's about understanding that our lives are part of a much larger story. John Chapman's work outlived him by centuries, providing sustenance and beauty to countless people. His life is a beautiful and enduring testament to the power of one person to make a lasting, positive impact on the world. He reminds us that the true measure of a life is not what we gather, but what we sow. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life and legacy of Johnny Appleseed. I hope his story has inspired you as much as it has inspired me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And do you not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss our next adventure. What does Johnny Appleseed mean to you? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep planting those seeds of hope. Take care. As night drapes its velvet cloak over the valley, I find myself drawn to the quiet majesty of the open sky. Here, Beneath a canopy of stars, the day's hustle fades into a gentle hum, and the real story begins to unfold. It's a story not written in books, but etched in the landscape around us, in the very air we breathe. Each star above seems like a distant, silent witness to the countless moments of quiet dedication that have shaped this place. It's in these moments of stillness, with the cool night air on my face, that I feel most connected to the legacy of those who came before. A legacy not of monuments or gold, but of living, breathing things. Think about it for a moment. Every time we choose to be kind, every time we lend a hand without expecting anything in return, we are doing something profound. It's like planting a seed. You might not see the results immediately. The ground might look unchanged tomorrow and the day after, but you've set in motion a powerful, natural process. This simple idea that every act of kindness plants a tree in time has been my guiding star. It's a beautiful metaphor, isn't it? A tree provides shade, fruit, and a home for countless creatures. It anchors the soil and cleans the air. It stands as a testament to a single, hopeful act performed long ago. Our small gestures of goodwill operate in much the same way. A word of encouragement might give someone the strength to persevere through a difficult day. Sharing what you have, even if it's just a little, can ripple outwards, inspiring others to do the same. These actions, like seeds, contain the blueprint for a future forest of compassion. They grow silently, their roots spreading deep into the soil of our community, strengthening it from within. We may never see the full extent of the forest we help create, but we can trust that it is growing, offering shelter and sustenance to generations we may never meet. I remember walking through the old orchard just as dusk settled in. The last rays of sunlight were filtering through the branches, painting the leaves in shades of gold and amber. It was then that a soft whisper seemed to move through the trees. It wasn't just the wind. It was something more. It was the sound of a story being told, the rustle of a million leaves speaking in unison. It was the sound of apple blossoms, their delicate petals carrying the promise of the coming harvest. This soft whisper, this gentle rustling, is the voice of nature itself, a constant, soothing reminder that life is a cycle of planting, nurturing, and reaping. It's the sound of patience. An apple tree doesn't rush. It follows the rhythm of the seasons, gathering strength from the sun, water from the rain, and nutrients from the earth. It blossoms in its own time, fruits in its own time. The wind passing through its branches is like a lullaby, a song of quiet confidence that everything is unfolding as it should. It teaches us that true growth, the kind that lasts, isn't forced. It's nurtured. It requires patience, care, and a deep-seated faith in the process. Standing there, I felt a profound sense of peace. The world can be loud and demanding, always urging us to move faster, to do more. But here, in the heart of the orchard, the only thing that mattered was the steady, silent growth all around me. The whisper of the wind through the apple blossoms was a call to slow down, to listen, and to appreciate the quiet miracles happening every second. It's a sound that connects us to the earth, to the passage of time, and to the enduring power of a single, well-tended seed. This connection to the past is what gives our present meaning. The trees that stand tall today were once just saplings, planted by hands that have long since returned to the earth. Those hands belonged to someone who had the foresight and the generosity to plant for a future they would unfully experience. They didn't plant for themselves. They planted for us. They planted so that one day we could walk through the shade of these magnificent trees, pick an apple from a laden branch, and marvel at the beauty of it all. Their legacy isn't written on a plaque. It's alive. It's in the sturdy trunk, the sprawling branches, and the sweet fruit. Every time we enjoy the bounty of this land, we are honoring their memory. We are participating in a story that began long before we were born. This continuity, this passing of the torch from one generation to the next, is the very essence of community. It's a shared inheritance of care and responsibility. We are the current stewards of this garden, tasked with nurturing it so that it may flourish for those who will follow us. It reminds me that our lives are intertwined. The farmer who planted these trees might be gone, but his spirit lives on in the life he cultivated. His kindness wasn't a fleeting moment. It became a permanent part of the landscape. And so, it is with our own actions. The kindness we show today will become the shade for someone tomorrow. The seeds of compassion we sow will grow into trees that bear fruit for years to come. We're all part of this incredible, living tapestry. Each of us adding our own thread to the larger design. As the moon climbs higher, casting a silvery glow over the fields, a deep sense of gratitude washes over me. Gratitude for the earth that sustains us, for the stars that watch over us, and for the simple, profound wisdom of a man who understood the power of planting a seed. His work continues, long after he is gone, in the rustle of the leaves, the buzz of the bees, and the taste of a sun-ripened apple. He showed us that the greatest gift we can give is one that continues to grow, one that nourishes the body and the soul long after we are gone. His life was a quiet sermon on the importance of thinking beyond ourselves. He wasn't building an empire. He was cultivating an ecosystem. He was creating a haven, and in doing so, he left behind a legacy that is far more valuable than any fortune. He left us with a living example of how to live a meaningful life. Life rooted in generosity, patience, and a deep love for the world around us. And so, as the world settles into its nightly slumber, my thoughts turn to him, the planter of these trees, the originator of this peaceful abundance. His vision has become our reality. The gentle breeze that cools my skin feels like a continuation of his breath, a soft, reassuring presence. The stars seem to shine a little brighter here, reflected in the dew on 1,000 leaves. It's a reminder that we are all sleeping under a canopy of grace, sheltered by the foresight and kindness of those who came before. So let's carry this feeling forward. Let's be the planters of our time. Let's sow seeds of kindness, patience, and hope wherever we go. Let us tend to our communities and our relationships with the same care that a gardener tends to their orchard, because the world needs more forests of compassion, more havens of peace. It starts with one person, one small act, one seed. As the night deepens and the world grows still, I feel a quiet contentment. The story doesn't end here. The seeds continue to grow, the roots run deeper, and the branches reach higher. The legacy is alive, and we are all a part of it. Sleep well beneath the trees he once planted. Thank you so much for joining me on this reflection. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps these stories continue to grow. Until next time, be well and keep planting good seeds.